Hello, friends of Studio Brûlé. This is Steve Brûlé, and it is coffee time. A casual session where I go over some of the things that have come across my desk in the last couple of days. In this case, it's been quite a long time, but today I'm going to focus on the BLM movement again. I don't know if you've seen the Black Lives Matter, the Red Zone video that I published yesterday. If you haven't, have a look at it. But first, I'm going to recognize a few of the regulars here. We got Derpatology, Mike Barre, Young Yupster 2501, and Light Post in the comments already. Thank you very much for joining me here. And I'll draw your attention to my VIP club member to the patriarchy, which of course authorizes me to comment on all the comings and goings of the evil global feminist empire, which has its thousands of tentacles, well-funded organizations spread right around the world. I did discover, somebody pointed out that I have a mic problem from time to time, and I discovered that this mic here, it's a cheapie that I got off of, I don't know, eBay or Amazon, I can't remember. So I'm going to have to replace that. I noticed that if I touch it the wrong way or move it, it has some static. So I apologize for that. Let me know in the comments if you have audio problems, if you recognize audio problems that I'm having. So, without further ado, let me get into some of what I've found or come across my desk since yesterday about the Black Lives Matter movement. And this one is somewhat shocking. I wish I had come across this before I had produced the video, but it came out, this came out only a few days ago, and then one of the viewers posted this link in the comments, and it gives us more interesting information about these girls here. The Black Lives Matter. They are not who they say they are. They are not the slightest bit interested in helping black men, the biggest cohort in the US, which is having problems. In fact, they are antagonistic against men in general and black men in particular. No, not really in particular. They are really anti-white. They are racist. They are socialists, they are Marxists, they are openly so, and they are cavorting with known brutal dictator Marxists who are supporting them and whom they support. This is a little shocking to me, although I shouldn't be shocked. I keep saying this, you know, after seeing so much from feminism over the years that nothing could shock me, but actually they still manage to shock. Because their bigotry, hatred, and ignorance has no depth, no end of the depth to it. No end of the depth to the bigotry, ignorance, and hatred of feminist groups in particular. And Black Lives Matter is, first and foremost, a feminist group. Feminism, of course, is Marxist. All the feminist ideology was lifted almost word for word from Marxism. Things like capitalism was switched out for patriarchy and so on. Instead of class warfare, they have gender warfare. But other than that, the ideology of feminism is Marxist ideology. And the ideology of Black Lives Matter is feminist ideology and therefore also Marxist ideology. And they are cavorting with Maduro in Venezuela. And they were strong supporters of Castro and they mourned his death, even though, as we'll see, they sent a delegation over to Cuba to investigate things. The delegation reported back that the Cuban government was racist against black people. That didn't faze them. All of this should register very deeply with everybody watching the Black Lives Matter movement around the world. And yet, almost none of these useful idiots in the mobs who are rioting and looting and murdering around the world know anything at all about Black Lives Matter. It's a sad show for humanity because the overwhelming majority of the public hears the words Black Lives Matter. They go no deeper than that, and they get behind the slogan. The slogan, and I talked about this in the video get to know Black Lives Matter, the Red Zone video, episode number 2. This is a process called usurping the moral high ground. And as I mentioned, the pro-life lobby, which is really pro-life, is against abortion. Now, whether you are against abortion or pro-abortion, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that the choice of names pro-life is a deliberate attempt to cast your opponents, your ideological opponents, in a bad light, forcing them to say something of the likes that if you're against them, you're against life. Of course, and it doesn't matter what your opinion is on abortion on this, but that is what the ideological or the debate trick is when you usurp the moral high ground by your choice of names. The pro-choice lobby, which could have called themselves pro-abortion, but they sidestepped this label by their choice of names as well. None of this matters, and well, it does matter because people are fooled by this simple trick. Black Lives Matter used this simple trick, but it's a trick to usurp the moral high ground and get the bulk of non-thinking automatons in the world to back you up. And that's what Black Lives Matter does. I recently saw a video today of Black Lives Matter protest. I didn't clip this, but I should have. I shared it, I think, on Facebook. If you're a Facebook friend, you can see it on my stream on Facebook. A group of about, it looks like maybe 100 Black Lives Matter members went into a restaurant, and I don't remember what town it's in, but it looks like a fairly nice restaurant that was open, and pushing their Black Lives Matter ideology. But if you look closely at the video, it's almost all upper middle class white kids. And they're getting behind this for no other reason than virtue signaling, and because they are too lazy to look behind the label Black Lives Matter to see what they are actually supporting when they support this group. And that tells you how effective this practice of usurping the moral high ground by your choice of names is. So now we're in a huge problem around the world. We have this bigoted, racist, Marxist group called Black Lives Matter gaining support in the millions, possibly billions around the world, and they are spreading racism against white people. And their ultimate goal is they choose white people for the same reason feminists choose white people in the end too, because the fact is, in the Western world is largely white, and the Western world was largely built, invented, constructed, and maintained by white people. So the white people do have, there are more white people in power in the Western world, not all around the world, because there are wealthy people of every race around the world. But in the Western world, where feminism and racism against white people exists, and Black Lives Matter exists, and all of these Marxist groups are trying to grow in the Western world, a huge number of the people in power are in fact white. And that's why they target white people. They really want to unseat democracy. They want to tear down capitalism. And to do that, people respond more to an evil target of a human than they do to a generic, faceless idea like capitalism. So BLM and feminists in general are racist against white people in order to promote their idea or their desire to usher in socialism and communism throughout the West. Let's get to the article, though. That's a more preamble than I had expected to talk about here. Let me skip ahead through this thing here. Oh, here, before we do, we'll just touch on this. The Cincinnati mayor says there's no evidence, a former Cincinnati mayor, there's no evidence of systemic racism in policing. And this is very true. And Heather McDonald also did a video on this on PragerU, well worth watching. There's no systemic racism in the police force throughout the U.S. And I suspect Canada is the very same. There is none. That's all a fantasy made up by Black Lives Matter and feminists in general. There's also an excellent video done by Elder, what's his name? Larry Elder. It's on PragerU as well, and he takes apart the Ferguson incident, where this phrase, hands up, don't shoot, came from. That's all a pack of lies. Larry Elder tears it apart and analyzes it. But here's the thing, and this is the fact is that the unthinking, automaton, useless idiot public jump on every single racist, banning, racist thing that comes up. And this hands up, don't shoot, this whole Black Lives Matter movement is a movement of racists. They're piggybacking on the growing sentiment of anti-whiteness in society. And this was first introduced by the feminists back in the 1980s, I think. There was the idea of white guilt, and then white privilege, and then white guilt. All of these ideas are coming from feminists. They're all bigoted, racist ideas. Let's carry on a little bit here. And this is another unfolding incident. And I think that Trump said something about this, but the Black Lives Matter New York president says they're going to burn it all to the ground if they don't get their way. And the people, the leaders in Chaz also said the same thing, that if you don't do what we want to do, they're going to burn everything to the ground. These are the kinds of people we're dealing with in Black Lives Matter. Now, here is the main thing I wanted to talk about today. And I really wanted to get at this because when I read it, I thought, I wish I'd had this for the Black Lives Matter video, because it really is revealing. It doesn't change the video, but it is an important point about who is Black Lives Matter. Reading the title with me. Let me get this a little bit bigger for you here. The links between Black Lives Matter and Nicolas Maduro revealed. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, one of the most brutal dictators in our time. A man who's unleashed the army to murder his own citizens. Let's read the subtitle. The organization's founders are avowed Marxists. And they're not hiding this, by the way. They're more interested in ideology than in solving racial inequality. Well, that's true. And look at the date here. This just came out June 25th, which was updated June 25th. I think it came out a day or two before June 25th. But June 25th is yesterday. That's when I published the Red Zone video called Get to Know Black Lives Matter. And we really do need to get to know Black Lives Matter, because there's a lot more under the surface of Black Lives Matter than meets the eye. Let's read on this. The link, by the way, is in the description. Let's read this from the top. Yet, at the Pan Am Post, we have found that while Black Lives Matter claim to oppose police abuse and racism around the world, the organization is simultaneously a great supporter of some of the world's most brutal and repressive dictators. In particular, the founders of BLM have been staunch supporters and allies of sanguinary Venezuela dictator Nicolas Maduro and of the Castro regime in Cuba. Let's read on. It is ironic that as BLM protest alleged police brutality in the United States, the organization praises a regime known for the brutal practices. Oh, I think my audio is a little high. Brutal practices of its security forces. It's no secret. There is no excuse for anybody in the West, save the most ignorant and insulated of them all, to not know that Venezuela is run by a brutal dictator. They may not know his name, Maduro. I think it's Maduro, isn't it? Let's back that up. Where is he? Maduro, yeah. Nicolas Maduro. They may not know his name, but you cannot be so ignorant about your times as to not know the squalor and the murder going on by the government in Venezuela. Let's read on here. In December 2015, Black Lives Matter sent a delegation headed by the organization's co-founder Opal Tometi to act as observers during Venezuelan parliamentary elections of that year. Let's just take a look here for a second. There's a picture. This is Tometi right here. This is Nicolas Maduro right here. And this, I believe, I'm not sure where the photo was taken, to be honest, but they've had more than one connection with Maduro because they've invited him over to New York. Maduro met with Black Lives Matter and was honored at one of their events in New York, as it turns out. And I think this is coming up in the article. The only accredited observers were from regimes and organizations friendly to the revolutionary cause in Venezuela. So, obviously, Maduro felt that BLM was friendly to their revolutionary cause, or they would not have invited BLM to act as witnesses or observers to their elections. So they had a relationship. They understood one another long before this visit. Reading from the top. Later that same month, Tometi penned an article where she espouses word for word the regime's standard text for international propaganda. Quote, in these last 17 years, we have witnessed the Bolivarian revolution champion participatory democracy and construct a fair, transparent election system recognized as among the best in the world, wrote Tometi about one of the world's most corrupt voting systems in history. This is Black Lives Matter, and they want to bring this to the US. They want to bring this to Canada. They want to bring it to the UK and all around the world. And when you look at the violent support of the millions of useful idiots in all of these countries, they stand a good chance of succeeding unless we oppose them with everything we've got. Let's read this from the top. Earlier in 2015, Maduro was given an award at the Afro-Descendants Summit held in Harlem. Maduro was invited at the behest of Black Lives Matter leadership. This is astounding, folks. It is astounding. We need to oppose these Black Lives Matter people. And there's questions out there, folks, of where the money for Black Lives Matter is headed. Some people say that the Democratic Party is using some of this money, if not most. Reading from the top. In the case of Black Lives Matter, both its co-founders are fanatical Marxists, and they have publicly admitted as much. Patrice Coolers, Tometi's colleague in the founding of Black Lives Matter, has publicly admitted to being a trained Marxist, and we are super versed in ideological theory, she says. Let's read on. On Fidel Castro's passing, BLM's global network officially stated, quote, we are feeling many things as we awaken to a world without Fidel Castro. There is an overwhelming sense of loss complicated by fear and anxiety. This is BLM. Now, anyone who knows anything about Cuba knows that there's strong racism against black people in Cuba. I mean, Negro black. Cubans are dark themselves, but they're not Negro. And there's a Negro population in Cuba who are discriminated against quite profoundly. And if you know anything about the Cuban Revolution, they rounded up and imprisoned gay men, and many of them were killed for being gay, tortured and killed. There is a good movie about that. I forget the name of it now, but if you look, there can't be that many movies about the Cuban Revolution. So if you look it up, you'll probably find the movie I'm talking about. I just can't remember the name of it. Let's read on here. This despite the fact that some of the organization's own members, on returning from a visit to Cuba, wrote, quote, "There is still so much evidence of oppression that was observed by the Black Lives Matter activists towards Black Cubans and diminished by white Cubans." Now, just let that sink in. I was in Cuba 20 years ago, in 2000. Let me have a sip of coffee here. And almost within the first day that I was in Cuba, I personally witnessed discrimination against Black Cubans. It's right in the open. And in the second part of this, diminished by white Cubans. What that means is that the Cuban government is discriminating, oppressing Black Cubans, and white Cubans are trying to stop it. Did any of this register with Black Lives Matter leadership? No, not one bit, because they don't care. Black Lives Matter is a feminist organization, and as a feminist organization, it is socialist Marxist. And they're trying to usher in Marxism around the world, socialism. This is feminism writ large. Now, these are the BLM members, of course. These are the useful idiots that probably were visiting Cuba on vacation and just, I don't think they were sent over there as a delegate to look into anything. They were just over there and they just reported back to their group members what they saw. And of course, this didn't register in the leadership of BLM because BLM, Black Lives Matter, that's just a name to usurp the moral high ground. The organization itself doesn't give a crap about Black lives. Most certainly, they do not give a crap against Black men's lives unless those men are dead and they can use them for fundraising. This is a kind of bigoted, racist, hypocritical organization that Black Lives Matter is. Let's read on. BLM's main claim to fame and its own name are derived from a premise that has been proven to be completely false. Police do not kill proportionately more Black men than they do white men. This is well known, and we talked about that just a few minutes ago. It is truly stunning that some of America's most renowned business leaders have chosen to ignore the evident and even glaring intent of BLM's founders to promote Marxism and a so-called revolution in the United States that has nothing to do with race and everything to do with ideology. They are pulling a huge hoax here, folks. The reason they are able to pull this huge hoax is because feminism has been preparing the culture for this for over 50 years. BLM would have nothing if not for feminism's preparation of the culture, laying the ideological ground to hatred of men and then hatred of white people. White supremacy is their boogeyman. Feminism has been promoting this as the biggest fear in the Western world for years. Little by little, they've made whiteness equal to patriarchy. It's become a synonym within feminism for patriarchy. Patriarchy was the words they had to use in the beginning, because if they came out and started talking white privilege and white guilt back in 1960s, they would have been laughed off the street. But they prepared the culture. They started with patriarchy. And little by little, they substituted in whiteness. They put in white privilege because white people supposedly are getting jobs for being white and are at the top, not because they worked hard, but because they're white. And then they put in white guilt because you have to feel guilty for not earning what you did not work for, what it was given to you because of your whiteness. So now we have white guilt. And now we have the original sin, which can never be atoned, which can never be forgiven, and always must be atoned for, and it's the sin of being born white, and that is embedded in the feminist religion, and Black Lives Matter is just one denomination of the feminist religion. I'm going to pause here for a moment and recognize Optimus Kime, I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you so much for your generous support of Studio Brûlé, Optimus. And Optimus says, Steve of the indefatigable land of Brûlé. Thank you so much for that. And Janice of the noble heritage of Fiemengo. What wonderful appellations they are. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't spend all of this money in one place unless you want to. Then definitely spend all of it in one place. Godspeed. Thank you so much for your support, Optimus. Did I read this entire quote here? So-called, yeah, I did. So let's carry on with this. Reading from the top, it is evident that the organization does not want to reveal its sources of funds nor how it spends them, yet no one seems to be reporting this fact. There are, not in the mainstream media, the mainstream media is not the slightest bit critical of Black Lives Matter. They can't afford to be, because the mainstream media has hooked its sail to the feminist star. All of the mainstream media is dominated by feminists. Feminists cannot and will not say anything negative about Black Lives Matter. So this particular fact has to be suppressed by the mainstream media. Otherwise, they'll fall out of favor with one of their own denominations, the Black Lives Matter subset of feminism. But these sources of funds, the reason that Black Lives Matter has many registered corporations with IRS in the US. As private corporations, they don't have to reveal the source of funds publicly. So they can, but they just have to reveal their funding to the IRS, who are not obligated to reveal it to anyone else. Let's hope there's some kind of criminal law in which the government can force an investigation into this on the basis that they are trying to destroy the country. Whether it's sedition or treason, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer or a tax guy. But what they are trying to do is to destroy Western culture. They are not even trying to disguise that fact. This is the amazing thing, folks. They come out and they say, we want to tear down patriarchy. Of course, patriarchy is just the code for white people. They want to tear down capitalism. They want to destroy the West. They openly say these things. They want to bring in a Marxist government, a Marxist system into the West. This is destruction of their way of life. They're openly saying it. Then they are openly attacking, burning down buildings, attacking police stations, burning down historical sites, tearing down monuments. They are not just shooting hot air. They fully 100% intend what they are saying they're going to do, which is to destroy the West. How is this not sedition? How is it not? This is what is inexplicable, is that they're not being called out for this yet. With any luck, Trump will be reelected, and he'll bring the hard hammer down on their heads, like in a way that they will never forget. And they'll spend the rest of their days in prison wondering why they didn't usher in their Marxist utopia, what went wrong. Well, what went wrong is that you're bigoted, hateful, inhumane racists, and we're not taking it. Imagine that. Imagine that. A group of people being attacked openly are saying, you know something? I think we'll defend ourselves. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed that the very people who defeated Hitler, who built the entire Western world, are going to rise up and defend themselves? Who would have guessed, huh? Well, it's going to happen, folks. Black Lives Matter, you haven't met resistance yet. But don't be fooled. That doesn't mean that you're just the entire culture is just going to roll over and let you beat them up, let you burn down their houses and buildings, Let you tear apart their lives, kill their sons and daughters. Black Lives Matter is not a black movement. This we need to recognize in no uncertain terms. And you young black fellows here that are risking your lives for Black Lives Matter, those ladies who started that don't even like you. They despise you. They would never invite you into their homes. They would never date you. They would never so much as even give you the time of day. They hate you. They are using you. Black Lives Matter is not a black movement. It is a racist, bigoted, Marxist, feminist movement intent on destroying the West, including the black men who are already suffering the most in the West. That's the ultimate story, and we need to really understand that. Don't be fooled by their choice of names. Anybody can call themselves God, and all it means is that they're psychotic. And Black Lives Matter are a group of psychopaths. Okay, folks, that's about all I'm going to talk about today. I do have some other things to talk about, but I'm not really prepared to. There was one comment, or a couple of comments on my video, the Red Zone video on Get to Know Black Lives Matter, suggesting that I shouldn't use quotes from the Bible and I shouldn't reference religious material because some viewers might be put off by that, or some people might be reluctant to share it. I have a different view on that. I think it's clear that the Bible is a cultural document. It's a cultural artifact. And I don't think anything's off the table, whether it's from the Bible or from any book. So it is an important cultural artifact, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian. We cannot deny the fact that the influence of the Bible in Western world is quite significant. And I am working on a video specifically on this topic, a bigger topic than that actually. It's on the topic of God, which is a very controversial topic today for a lot of reasons, some of which I hope to get into in this video that I'm working on. So with that, I'd like to remind everybody to do something you love to do every single day. No matter how bad things are in your life, do something you love to do. It's very important for your mental health and your physical well-being. If you don't have something you love to do, find something you love to do. And with that, have a safe and enjoyable weekend. And we'll hope to see you on Monday.